Hello, students. Mr. John here. Welcome to Chapter 3, Lesson Deuce. In the last lesson, we talked about the people of the Paleolithic, or Old Stone Age. There were some big advancements like fire and flint, but let's be honest, they were cave people. Today we take a look at a big jump, farming. So, growing plants doesn't seem all that exciting, but with the advent of agriculture, people could stay in one place and get lots of food. Pretty nice. This gave early humans time for other things than just starving all the time. Now, as it was before, there was an immense amount of history covered in just this one lesson, so I'll be on the briefer end on this lesson, but right here is linked 3-2 in your digital textbook. I advise you to read that sometime before the test. Let's hop over to the next page and get into the meat and potatoes of this. Now, at the end of the Ice Age, which we touched on in the last lesson, the temperatures warmed up and the folks that survived the cold began moving to nice temperate zones. Makes sense, right? Why not live where you like the weather? So my grandpa goes to Texas every winter. It was at this time that people began relying on growing their own food rather than finding it. They also began to domesticate animals. The domestication of animals involves training, but mostly breeding animals to reproduce desirable traits, like, not trying to eat the villagers. For example, your grandma's Pomeranian is a product of the domestication of wolves. That means way back then, in the Stone Age, they started to domesticate wolves, and they would pick their two maybe most docile wolves, the nicest wolves, and then those wolves would make babies. And then they'd pick the most nice, of the cubs, and then those cubs would grow up and they make babies, and you end up with very friendly wolves, which become Pomeranians. Crazy, right? Now, these changes in the way people lived marked the beginning of a new Stone Age, or the fancy word for it, the Neolithic Age. The Neolithic Age ran from about 8,000 to 4,000 BC and is generally defined by humanity giving up their nomadic ways in favor of systematic agriculture, which basically means they grew food regularly now. With more food, population increased. The agricultural revolution that occurred is considered by some scientists to be the most important event in all of human history. Pretty exciting stuff. Now, let's talk about life in the Neolithic Age. So now that folks didn't have to travel to find food anymore, permanent housing was built. Pretty nice upgrade. Location was important. A settlement needed to be by fields where food could be grown, but also near a source of water. One of the oldest communities was Jericho, located in present-day Israel. The buildings were made from sun-dried brick, so they had these, houses now, pretty nice brick houses, and it had 7-foot thick walls. The walls of Jericho. Pretty cool. Another farming community was Kettle Hayuk, found in present-day Turkey. The houses there were also sun-dried bricks, but crazy shift here, their doors were on the roof. They think it was to help make the houses cooler. The city also contained shrines, which were holy places. That's what a shrine is, usually a holy place. There were some major benefits to the settled life. It was safer, as permanent buildings offered better protection from wildlife, weather, and other people. Farming made more food, which in turn made more people, and then those more people were able to make more food. With an abundance of food, something known as specialization became possible. This basically means that people took up special jobs other than farming because there was enough food to go around. A farmer could now sell some food to buy clothing from a guy that only made clothing, or a pot from a potter, a guy who only made pots. And they had the time to do that because they could now buy food for people that had more than enough. In some cases, however, population growth was too fast, and nearby resources were depleted, and towns had to be abandoned. So, too many people, too fast. As time in these Stone Ages progressed, so did technology. Better tools were produced as needed, like hoes and mill grinders. People began to make metal tools. It is surmised that they discovered copper by accident after heating up some rocks and finding molten copper inside. In Western Asia, tradespeople mixed this copper with tin, another metal, to make bronze, which was stronger than either. pretty cool. So you got bronze, which is a mixture of copper and tin, but when you put them together, they become stronger than either or. So bronze, however, was really expensive, and only well-off people could get it. The period of time between 3000 and 12,000 BC, when bronze became prominent, was known as the Bronze Age. There's some bronze tools right here, some sweet bronze swords. Alright, the first civilizations emerged, which is really where we're heading with this class. With systematic farming and villages growing, complex communities began to develop. These communities became what we know as civilizations. 4 civilizations of the Bronze Age were Mesopotamia, Egypt, India, and China. We'll learn about all of them in a chapter each coming up here. All of these civilizations had a number of things in common. Each had a government. Government was in charge of things like protecting the food supply and the city. Officials managed food supplies and built public projects, like, things for irrigation, roads, buildings, that kind of stuff. And the earliest governments were typically some kind of monarchy, which means there is a king or a queen in charge. Religion is another thing formed in these civilizations. Rulers and priests would perform rituals to win the favor of the gods. Religion provided explanations for the forces of nature, and it was a large part of these early people's lives. Social classes also developed. Typically, the wealthy and ruling class was at the top of the social ladder. Priests were usually pretty far up there too, as well as the warrior class. Normal Joe Schmo workers were usually near the bottom, but not at the very bottom, because the very bottom was typically your slaves. Now, writing and art became more prominent in these early civilizations, as are other things. Writing and art, like culture. The first written symbols were used to keep records. I watched a documentary that put forth the idea that the first symbols were used to actually keep track of beer, which they think was also discovered by accident. So, yay! Alright, up on the next page, we've got some questions, some written questions, because you're my advanced class. Let's answer all these questions. It'll probably be about a paragraph to answer all 4. That's 1 sentence per. So let's take a look at our question. How did the agricultural revolution lead to the first civilizations? When answering this question, you need to answer sub-question. What was the agricultural revolution? How did the agricultural revolution lead to civilization? And what are 2 traits of the first civilizations? Oh, and proper grammar and spelling, please. So that's it. That's a tough one, but you can see the line of events that happened. It's like, okay, farming's invented. People can live in one place. There's enough food so people can do work other than farming, and this means they have time for things, and then it leads to civilizations and has things like government, religion, social classes, art, and writing. There you go! Alright, so if you watch the video, you're probably in good shape to answer that big question by answering these tinier questions. Alright, I hope you look at this and answer the question correctly. That's it for the day. None shall pass, because that's it for the day. Dropping some Gandalf on you. Alright, if you have any questions, please let me know. Otherwise, have a wonderful day.